Hi guys, so while we all know that Brexit was a massive mistake and it's likely to remain unfixed, at least while Britain is outside the single market and the customs union, which brings us to the age-old problem of listening to politicians over experts. Now back in 2019, one of the loudest cheerleaders for Brexit, Jacob Rees-Mogg, was promoting the idea that Britain could not only leave without a deal, but the impact of such a scenario would be zero on UK businesses, and it would actually drive down prices of consumer goods, such as shoes.
Boris Johnson has made it completely clear that we must leave on the 31st of October, and that yes, of course, he would be willing to do a deal with the EU, but if it sticks by its intransigent message that there's no possible change to the withdrawal agreement, then we would leave on WTO terms, which is nothing to be frightened of. That lots of countries around the world trade on a WTO basis. We can prosper on that basis. We would set our own tariffs. We could have cheaper food, clothing and footwear straight away by getting rid of the protectionist anti-trade tariffs that the EU imposes. And it would be very good for the British people, and it would provide certainty. And I think once there's certainty, the country will begin to reunite.
So he highlighted here the idea that the UK could have left without a deal. Now imagine a situation where the UK had left without a deal. At the moment, Boris Johnson has non-tariff barriers imposed on Britain. If the UK had left without a deal, there would have been tariffs included in that as well. So the situation would be much worse. And Jacob Rees-Mogg is saying here that no, it would have been fine. And for example, footwear would have been much cheaper. Well, this brings us to a lady called Tanya Marriott, who represents Solution, a company that deals in footwear. Let's hear what she had to say.
As I said previously, most of our suppliers import on our behalf, but whereas previously we were able to get special orders for customers within 2 days, 3 days maximum, we can't order special orders for customers because the suppliers are refusing point blank to ship just one pair of shoes. And deliveries are taking between 2 to 3 weeks at an absolute, on a good run. Most of them are having to wait to have a full container before they can ship it because of all the paperwork and the complexities. You can't share containers, lorry loads coming in from different brands or different suppliers. The costs on paperwork, the fact that they're having to set up, majority of our suppliers had warehouses in the EU that they'd pull the stock down from for the UK. They're now having to incur extra costs, which for either setting up warehouses in the UK or setting up bonded warehouses in Europe so that they don't have to incur double duty, because obviously if goods are coming out from outside the EU, they're coming into the EU and being charged duty and then being charged duty again to come into the UK. And duty on coming into the UK is also charged. The duty is calculated including freight costs, which on a container I've been told had gone from £2,000 to ship from China to now you're talking more than 20,000 to ship a container from China, and duty by the UK government is being charged including freight, which the inflationary costs on that for shoes is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, at the moment, majority of our suppliers are taking that cost and realizing that they don't want to, sort of increasing the cost of shoes by £20 is not going to be great from a sales perspective, but there's only so long that they can maintain that. And, and say, because we sell branded product, we sell at recommended retail price. So we don't have the option to increase our margins either. And as a small business, we need those margins to be able to survive.
And there you have it. So it used to be the case where they would import goods from the EU, the tariff would be paid there, and then they would be shipped to the UK without any extra cost. Now, of course, there's the shipping cost, but there would be no extra fees to pay. So when we get back to people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, these are people who obviously had no understanding of how trade works. They were warned by experts in this industry. And the response from Brexiteers was, well, you need to believe more in Britain. belief will get us through this. Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg and others were talking about how we just need to believe more in Brexit Britain, global Britain. Boris Johnson just recently was talking about how there are no natural barriers to trade or something to that effect. Businesses are struggling because of this. Now, the price of containers, okay, that's not directly related to Brexit, of course, but every extra piece of paperwork slows down the process. Every extra cost, because the UK is now a third country, makes it more expensive for these businesses to operate in the UK. If they're importing stuff from abroad, they want to export it to the EU or import it from the EU, it's a problem now. It's a cost that has to be passed on to the consumer. Somebody has to pay for this. Somebody has to pay for this Brexit bureaucracy. And I hope the takeaway from this is that people will stop listening to the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson has to be called on, but he's the Prime Minister. But people like Jacob Rees-Mogg should just shut the F up, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. He didn't know what he was talking about. And going forward, we need to stop listening to him. He has no experience when it comes to trade. He has no experience when it comes to the importing goods or exporting goods or the bureaucracy that's connected to that. And, Jacob Rees-Mogg is one of these Brexiteers. And I've been really tearing my hair out over the last number of years because these people are put up and presented as experts. They're good at selling the idea that, all of this is worth it because we're going to get our sovereignty back. All of this is worth it because we're going to sign all these trade deals. When the experts, the people who actually know what they're doing, the people who do this for a living, Jacob Rees-Mogg doesn't do this for a living. Boris Johnson doesn't do this for a living. Nigel Farage doesn't do this for a living. But the people who do were raising the alarm bells before all of this happened. They are the people that need to be listened to. Can this be fixed? Well, as I said at the beginning, rejoining the single market and the customs union would fix a lot of these problems. But who's against that? Well, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. But once again, we need to listen to the experts, not the politicians.